Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the very first talk series, Connecting the Dots. As a consumer, I was having a very tough time understanding what exactly clean food is and how to identify them and where to get them from. My frustration was that just like veg and non-veg food has clear indications to make easier for us to choose, why is there no marking for clean food? And hence why Dot was born. We see so many adverts, buzzwords, feed, reels related to food that we think it might just all get a bit confusing for everyone. What can we eat? What can we not eat? Is it good? Is it healthy? Does it have too many preservatives? Half the ingredients we don't understand. And why should that be? The average person spends about 15 minutes of their day thinking about food alone. So, don't we need to keep it simple? And that's just what White Dot stands for. Short ingredient list, no added preservatives, no refined flour, no refined sugar, no uh, GMO free, healthy fats, less processed and whole grain foods. To help build this awareness and answer so many questions about food and how it impacts our body, we have a special guest here with us today. He's an accomplished diabetologist based in Hyderabad with a passion for implementing technology to enhance diabetes care. He's dedicated his professional career to this field, completed his undergrad medical training in Vadodara, India, and then underwent a 2-year research fellowship in diabetology under the renowned Padma Shri professor Dr. V. Mohan at Chennai. He is widely acclaimed expert in diabetes monitoring technology, that's CGM, continuous glucose monitoring, and its use in optimizing diabetes management. He has also authored original chapters in national and international textbooks on diabetes associated with organ complications. In 2022, he was the faculty member at the Time in Range Academy in Park Nicollet International Diabetes Center in Minnesota, USA. He's certified in diabetes care during fasting periods such as Ramadan, Shivratri, and several traditional fasts, and also certified as on the subject of gestational diabetes mellitus by the South Asian Federation of Endocrine Society. As diabetes management trainer, he has trained more than 4,500 plus doctors in the last 3 years alone. And apart from being a doctor, he's also the director and consultant and regional trainer for Business Networking International, the Hyderabad region. Dr. Harsh is an expert in the field of diabetology. Let us learn how to connect the dots between our food and body. Dr. Harsh, welcome to Connecting the Dots. We all know someone who has diabetes. It has a direct link with what we put into our body, and yet there are so many myths around it. So we're all very excited about how you're going to help us bust some of those myths. Shall we dive in?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind words of introduction. At the outset, I'd like to congratulate the Y Dot team for this wonderful initiative, a first of a kind, and definitely this is going to change the way we consume our foods. So let's dive in. So today I'm gonna discuss with you the diabetes side of things, specifically for persons having diabetes, and also maybe to look at a little bit on the prevention aspects as well.
Right.
Let's go ahead. Yeah.
So to begin with, what does clean food mean to you?
Yes. So I think if we simplify it, the foods which are less processed, it is more balanced in terms of the distribution of plant-based components,
Mhm.
foods being sugar-free, foods being without gluten, and in simple words, a wholesome food is what we would call it a clean food.
Right. And how is clean food different from healthy foods? Like you see a lot of brands marking themselves as healthy, and is that really clean? Is it not clean? There's so many doubts about that.
Well, I think ingredient list is what differentiates clean food to be the clean food, because the clarity in say a portion of grains, whole proteins, whether you take the fats. Now out of fats also there are a lot of healthy fats and unhealthy fats. So depending on what are we seeing at the label is what would really differentiate, and that would even apply for a packaged food, because
Right.
based on the list of ingredients we can differentiate between the healthy and the clean one on these metrics.
Right. And there's a huge movement amongst consumers
Yes,
itself, to start reading the label. And you see so many of
absolutely.
these Instagram accounts that are talking about the different ingredients in the label, which really shouldn't be in
Yes,
our foods. Right.
absolutely.
So, coming to the most important ingredient, sugar. We all love a good
Right.
sugar rush. We're upset. We want to get into a little chocolate to make us, it's a quick
Yes,
pick me up. So, what is the
yes.
difference between natural sugar and refined sugar?
Right, perfect. So this is very important to understand. A natural sugar is a sugar which is part of a wholesome food generally, whereas the refined sugar is typically present in all forms of processed and refined foods and beverages. Now, when it comes to the processing, because if we have natural sugars without we changing it its nascent form, it is none or bare minimum. When it comes to the natural sugar side, again, when it comes to the refined sugar side, it is highly processed, and definitely it is devoid of fiber and nutrients, which are very very crucial. So, if I give an example, a food which is rich in fiber, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants would generally have a natural form of sugar,
Right.
whereas the refined ones are pure empty calories.
Like
And
for
when
fruits, for that matter,
yeah, so
right?
fruits for that matter will have they'll fall under the natural sugar category.
Right.
And when it comes to say a cola drink, or maybe any beverage, any refined beverage, that would fall under refined sugar
Right.
drink, or say a milkshake, that would fall under that.
Right. I mean, some of them
Juices,
you see the first
yes,
ingredient, forget milk, the first ingredient is sugar.
yes,
So
absolutely. And also it's very important to define what types of sugars come under the two. So typically under natural sugar we have fructose, which is basically present in natural wholesome fruits,
right,
lactose, which is again present in milk in its unadulterated form,
right,
sucrose, again, which is part of certain vegetables and fruits, and then maltose, again, it is something which is found in grains like the
right,
whole wheat grain, whole millet grain. So again, millets are also not golden food. They also have carbohydrates. Just that because of a better fiber contexture, they are slightly preferred over the wheat. But then it doesn't really reduce its ability to increase the sugars. So
right.
coming to refined part, we see brown sugar. Even the brown sugar, so-called brown colored sugar, is also refined sugar. It is not a natural sugar. It is not
With
a
just
healthy
some
form of sugar.
extra coloring and making
Yes,
it brown, so
yes,
we feel like, oh, this
yes.
is organic, this is healthy.
Yes, and many sugars even come in a caramelized process, so
Right.
it's very important to be careful. Coconut sugar is also a refined sugar. Cane sugar is also a refined sugar, and
Wouldn't
honey
coconut
is
sugar come under natural sugars?
no, absolutely not. It's a
Right.
refined form of sugar, and it is same with honey sugar. Honey is also a refined form of sugar, though the source is natural, but
Hmm.
you cannot consume an unprocessed honey. You'll get
What about the
indigestion.
ones, that you get fresh from the woods, or you have a lot of these
Yes,
people who collect them fresh from
yes, collect
the
them, but they have to process it to make it shelf life
longer?
eligible. Yes. So they have to, and that processing is where the problem is. The moment it gets processed, the whole fiber, the whole, the nutritive value goes down significantly. In fact, that's one of the reasons why in EU, it is clearly nowadays it has been, they're mandating the health norms where they don't want you to feed your children up to the age of 10 years. They don't want you to make your child experience the taste of a
Of
of a
sugar.
refined sugar.
Yes.
Well, natural sugar is not never been a problem,
Right.
not before, not now as well. Then the refined sugar is where all the challenges lie. So yeah.
Right.
So these are a few examples, and again, as we discussed the different sources of the sugars, so fall in the types of food under them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And well, everyone says, "Oh, itna meeta mat khao, you will get diabetes and things like that." So, is diabetes really caused by eating high sugar foods, or is it caused by a lack of functioning of a body organ?
So, sugar acts as a catalyst. It doesn't act as a source. So, if you already have a pre-existing history of, say, genetic inheritance risk of diabetes, what sugar is going to do is it will trigger it. It will
Right.
increase the further possibility of a person getting diabetes. Well, it will not cause diabetes per se, but then again, it's important. World Health Organization has given a global cutoff, which is daily, what we call as recommended daily limit for
Hmm.
sugars, and it's for men it's just 36 grams, just 36 grams, that is 3 teaspoons, that's it. And for women it's just 2, it's
And we're
just 2
definitely
teaspoons,
all
that's it.
consuming way more than that.
Way more than that, right? So these are limits based on American Heart Association guidelines and so on and so forth. A lot of global bodies have looked into it and come to this consensus. It's a very average consensus, but then very much relevant, right?
Right.
So yeah.
And you had some interesting statistics here where you talked about the studies have suggested 50 to 80% of added sugar intake in India comes from
Yes.
processed foods and beverages.
Yes. So I think we have some amazing work done from Indian Council of Medical Research as well, and NIN as well, National Institute of
Right,
Nutrition,
right.
and even with FSSI bodies, they've done a great deal of research where, when we talk about packaged milk drinks, milk-based drinks,
Hmm.
6 to 15 grams of sugar is added per serving. We
Wow.
are talking about 36 grams as the entire day's consumption.
Right.
Probably half of your thing comes just from the tiny pack what you're having.
Yeah.
So that's very alarming. And in fact, there's been 10% annual increase in sugar content of all the kind of refined foods, like whatever we find over the years.
Right.
And again, when it comes to there was a study done in Chennai in 2019 where it was found that 50% of added sugar intake of the entire day's consumption was attributed from refined and processed foods which had hidden sugars. So imagine if we have what you guys are doing, like a labeling, a white dot
Hmm.
labeling, which clearly differentiates the food. The same food could be preferred with a non-processed sugar. So these
Right.
hidden sugars could actually be prevented from consumption itself.
What are
So
those hidden sugars that you're referring to?
so as we discussed in the previous one, it could be different types of additives, like say high fructose corn syrup. Okay,
Right.
that's
That's a
something
big
which
one.
is it's used right and left. Yes,
Yes.
agave nectar. Many nectars are used. We feel nectars are derived from nature. Well, yes, but then they're processed heavily to be edible.
Right.
An unprocessed nectar you can't even eat.
Right.
So that's it. Then definitely, we already discussed about cane sugar and coconut sugar and all others. So
Right.
basically these all are the hidden ones. And then
Okay.
again, you see, the biggest threat is maida. We under note it, under identify it, but
Right.
then that's the deadliest form of refined carbohydrate if we
Right.
see from the whole area of lists. Yeah.
That's true. And as you mentioned that the global recommendation is 3 spoons for 3 tablespoons for men and 2 tablespoons for women. Do you think
Right.
there's anyone literally on the planet who's even maintaining that?
Maybe my diabetes patients are very, very compliant. They are, in fact, I proudly
Right.
call them as best patients in the world, because they genuinely understand the science of the problem, and then
Mhm.
they stick to the solution of the problem. Hence, they get very good diabetes control.
Right.
So, and we also allow one cheat meal in a week, right?
Right.
So we don't want to cage everyone
True.
with
It's
everything.
very
So we are
difficult to once
we are
you've
human
tasted the
beings.
refined sugar, you
Yes,
definitely
yes,
want
we
it.
are human beings, so yes, there are always cheat
Right.
meals which are permitted. So I think
Right.
all in all, it is doable. It's not something which is impossible. The only thing is we need a very good label education, which I
Hmm.
believe you guys are coming up with.
Right.
So that's going to change the game, because now I think from the brief conversation with your scientific team, I got to know that in Europe they are going to mandate food label as a part of education even for children, which
Right.
is really going to have a huge impact.
Right. Teaching
So
them young, and that's what's
yes,
important when they
yes,
understand to
yes,
connect with their food in the right
yes.
way. That's really important.
This is a game changer.
Let's do for something fun. Let's break down into steps of how our body processes sugar. I mean, we all know it's not good for
Brilliant.
us, but we don't understand how exactly, the steps go. So let's hear it from you
Yes,
and break it down.
certainly. So I'll try to make it as simple as possible. So starting with
Yes.
the first step, which is the first what we call as breakdown step, where
Right.
the digestion breakdown process happens of
Hmm.
sugars. When you take a bite, right at the time when you take a bite in your teeth, the enzymes in your mouth and stomach start breaking down the complex sugar as it moves forward, right? So that's level one. So the first breakdown happens here,
Right.
mainly the glucose which gets absorbed here, the most
Hmm.
simplest refined form of carbohydrate, that is glucose, basically gets absorbed here. And if it's a direct glucose, it gets absorbed here. If it's a lactose, or if any complex carbohydrate, it'll still take a couple of more steps to
Breakdown.
breakdown. Henceforth, the differentiation between refined and unrefined sugars, right? I mean, natural sugars and refined sugars. If it's a refined sugar, the absorption begins much, much early, right at this point, which is
Okay.
not what we want to happen, right? And then comes the absorption pathway, which is glucose travels to your small intestine and then enters into your bloodstream. Once it's broken down, say if it's a complex carbohydrate, it'll reach till the sections of intestine to get absorbed. Following that comes the moment it gets absorbed, insulin gets a ringer that, boss, there is glucose in your body. It's time to release insulin. So typically, what's the relationship between insulin and glucose is? Insulin makes sure that the glucose gets utilized by your body cells, all your body cells, to fulfill the energy needs. So it's a fuel in your body. Glucose is a carbohydrate, is a fuel in your body. Insulin basically activates the receptors on your body cells so that it uses up the glucose for the energy purpose needs. And what really happens in diabetes is either there's lack of insulin production, or there is insulin production happening in excess, but just the receptors are not working. Henceforth, the resistance is there towards the produced insulin by our own body. Henceforth, the glucose not getting utilized, it keeps on circulating in the blood, and it keeps on staggering up, leading to
Right.
organ complications due to the excess. So that's the most critical step, which is the pancreas producing your insulin at a glucose levels at an alert levels, and then comes the fueling in the cells, which is what we discussed.
Right.
The moment insulin gets in contact with the cell receptors, it opens up channels to use up glucose for the energy purpose needs. Now, what happens of the excess glucose? Suppose say the energy need is satisfied, but then if we keep on adding up a lot of carbs in our day to day needs beyond the safety limit, it basically converts into a metabolite, what we call as glycogen, which gets stored into fat as your
Right.
excess body store, which basically further worsens. If it's in excess, it further worsens the resistance of insulin in your body. So
And which is
henceforth,
what
this is
leads
how,
to
yes,
diabetes.
diabetes, obesity, fatty liver,
Right.
a lot of interconnected disorders, PCOD in women. So
Right.
these are all very much linked. So yeah, this is the
Right.
the
That's great.
simplest way I
Yeah,
can
I think
explain.
that's it's very nicely put, like, in simple steps for people to understand
Yes,
how
yes,
sugar is
absolutely.
processed by the body. And
Yeah.
how do processed foods impact your insulin level?
Right, right. So very important question. So basically, there are three challenges when it comes to processed food. First is lack of fiber. Because
Right.
there's no fiber, it basically speedens up the absorption of glucose. If
By
there's a
refined
fiber,
flour, you mean?
yes, by
Right.
refined flour. So if we have a flour which is with fiber, it is definitely going to take a lesser intensity of absorption, as in the time required for absorption of the same carbohydrate which is with fiber is going to be longer, which is
Hmm.
going to benefit, because that's what is going to give your insulin enough time to activate the receptors and make the systems ready to absorb the glucose, right?
Right.
In a non-diabetic scenario. In a
Right.
diabetic scenario, things are very different based on the nature of diabetes, the type of diabetes which you have. A lot of individualized variations exist here. But then,
Right.
in general, if I summarize, the sugar overload, fiber deficiency, um, and the insulin metabolism changes, basically all these three things are interconnected. And this is how really the processed foods impact your
Insulin.
insulin production as well as the utilization. Because pancreas may be in overperformance, it may be
Right.
overproducing the insulin. uh, it may not be able to cope up with the volume of refined carbs we are fueling in our body.
Hmm.
So this often leads to hyperinsulinemia, which is a state where you see altered overproduction of insulin, which basically exhausts your pancreas producing insulin producing cells in your pancreas over time,
Right.
which also often triggers diabetes. So
Right.
these are all mechanisms which possibly trigger even at an early age. You might have seen recently that people as small as say under 15 are getting type 2
Yes.
diabetes, which
Yes.
was very
That's true.
uncommon. In say 10 years back also, the rates were very low. So all
Right.
these factors are interconnected
That
in that
has
way.
created a huge spike in the number
Yes,
of people getting diabetes. Yes.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
what, according to you, are inflammation causing foods?
Yes. So again, when we see about diabetes, non-insulin factors, these are the two one of the most concerning. One is these inflammation-producing factors, and then the weight gain, which also attributes to all these challenges, the
Right.
over-calorization, what we go through. So again, there are foods like say red meats
Mm-hmm.
and processed meats, particularly, which is again in fashion right now. Refined carbs we already discussed, in a way where, the corn syrup laden foods, the
Right.
foods which have lot of processed sugar to increase the shelf life. Because see, a processed sugar is actually miraculous in terms of extending the shelf life of a product. So wherever this is used, that is there. Fried foods, and the foods which are rich in omega 6. So it's very important to understand there's always a ratio of omega oils which is to be looked at in the label when you're purchasing any omega labeled food, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's a supplement or anything per se, because omega 6 rich oils are actually harmful. So they are often conventionally used in cooking and other aspects, but then,
Right.
it throws off the omega 3 balance, which is very important. And we just have to be very very careful in this
Right.
aspects, because say choosing a mustard oil or a groundnut oil over a conventional sunflower oil could be a better, say, replacement just to begin with.
Because of
Because
the balance in omega 3 and
yes,
6.
yes, yes. So the moment the balance is disturbed, the
Mm-hmm.
moment we see, reduction in the balance of omega 3, inflammation process kicks in. Omega
Okay.
3, see, 6 also is important to a certain degree in certain way, but then again, as I said, there's a ratio which is 3 to 6, which is
Right.
fixed, which is to be there. And again, when it comes to, what should we really do to counter this, like how can we make changes? So, like, say, instead of refined grains, polished grains, shifting
Mm-hmm.
to an unpolished form of a grain is something which is very simple and easy to do. That's what our ancestors have been doing for millions of years,
Right.
maybe not thousands of years. Is that's how our ancestrals have been eating food, right? Now, if you see rice itself, we have polished and unpolished rice, right? We
Correct.
still have unpolished rice. So choosing the unpolished one is something which can easily reduce the inflammation effect in your body because of the fiber content.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes. So yeah, these are just a few tips. I think
Right.
nutritionists are the right
We'll be able
people
to.
to take even a deeper dive on this subject and give a more better conclusive solutions. And again, we discuss about omega 3, right? So
Right.
the foods which have a better ratio of omega 3, or say we call them omega 3 rich. Again,
Mm-hmm.
we have quite a few options in our foods, like say flax seeds, chia seeds,
Right.
walnuts, edamame. It's quite in fashion. In fact, there are a few restaurants which have started
Right. And
edamame
pricing it
selling.
really high.
Yes, yes. The sprouts, all forms of sprouts have very good
Right.
omega 3. So I think,
And I think there's
yeah.
also something that's very much being put on labels now.
Hmm.
It probably was even present before. So, low GI foods, you see this on a lot of labeling now
Yes, yes,
to
yes,
indicate that this will help manage your diabetes better. Could you explain to us what a low GI food is?
yes. So basically, GI is glycemic index.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a quantitative analysis, but it's a qualitative aspect of a food. So it's a
Right.
tendency of a food to elevate your sugars.
Okay.
So a low GI food is definitely to be preferred, but then a very very important concept is to be understood here. GL, which is glycemic load, is
Right.
more important to understand than glycemic index. The simple reason is, see, if there's a low GI food, then that does not give you liberty to consume as much as you want.
Right.
Or if there's a, see, there are times where we see a low GI food is consumed so much in the volume of the glycemic load itself is very high, which is more dangerous than a
Right.
high GI food, which is just consumed in, say, a bits.
Is white rice a low GI food?
No, it's a high GI food. So to simplify this, again, food labeling is something which is very critical here. If we see any food with GI less than 55, it is typically considered low GI food. And to
Okay.
calculate GL, which is still missing in most of the foods, in fact, I'll suggest you guys to work on it when you start up the whole rollout of the ideation process,
Mhm.
where we also mandate people to declare the GL, which is simply glycemic index multiplied by average carbohydrate grams of one serving
Okay.
divided by 100. It's simple as that. Very simple formula. And here, the cutoffs for GL are less than 10. So any
Right.
food which has a glycemic load less than 10 is actually consuming worth. Why? Because alone GI is not enough to look at the real safety of the food. Because as we see, serving size is what really creates the end outcome, not the
Right.
nature of what you're eating alone. So that's one takeaway I'd like to
So two
give to
foods that you
audience.
can give us that would be low GI or low GL foods rather,
So low GL in terms of so every food can be low GL. That's the
depending on how
beauty
it's
here.
made.
Depending on how it's made and depending on how much it is consumed. So I'll give you an
Right.
example. See, watermelon is believed to be, very very friendly for diabetes. But
Right.
then people fail to understand, though it has a slightly, borderline GI aspect, it has a lot of GLF aspect. Can you eat one piece of a watermelon? No, it's always consumed in a larger quantity. So the
Because you
quantity.
feel it's just liquid. It's not going to add
Exactly.
up.
Exactly the point. So what we really
Right.
suggest in our patients is we don't tell them to stop watermelon, but we tell them to club it with two other varieties of fruits which are more fiber rich. So what
Right.
happens is, rather than a plate being a single watermelon plate, it
Hmm.
becomes, say, a watermelon, guava, apple combination. The same
Right.
portion, say 100 grams of fruit bowl what you're eating, but then
Hmm.
it's comprised of multiple varieties of fruits rather than just one,
Right.
impacting a higher GL aspect of the watermelon,
That
right?
makes a lot of
So
sense. Yes.
again, it rounds up to the volume of food rather than just the nature of the food and how we combine it with other things. So
Right.
I think, yeah, this I believe would be a better example to differentiate the two. Yes.
I have one last question for you before we
Yes.
wrap up. Is so a lot of people are doing intermittent fasting, and some do it obviously for religious reasons. Now Ramadan's going to be coming up, so
Yes. Yes.
what are the two foods that you can recommend which are good for breaking a fast, whether it's a intermittent fast or whether it's a religious fast?
Okay, so it's very difficult to generalize two foods because there are two parameters we want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
First thing is, what are the medications? Because there are certain medications which have short-term impact. Like there are certain medicines which work only for 4 hours.
Right.
So, and there are certain medicines which we recommend only in the Ramadan, or say in these kind of fasting periods,
Mm-hmm.
so that when you break a fast, definitely you're going to be more hungry. You're
Right.
definitely going to be eating more food. So what really happens is, if you're going to eat more food, you need a higher intensity medication for that 2 to 3 hours of your first meal, which you're breaking your fast
Right.
with. But as you asked, if you
If
ask me
you're not
one
on any
simple food.
medication, if you're just
Uh-huh,
a
uh-huh.
normal person
So
with normal
in that
diabetes.
case, what we typically suggest is you're breaking a fast into 3 meals. You
Okay.
start with a small bowl of fruits. That's the best thing to break your fast with, because there won't be a sugar rush there. There'll be
Right.
complex carbohydrates, right? So for a non-diabetic person, I'm recommending this. For
Right.
diabetic, everything is customized,
Right.
specific to the condition, medication, and so on and so forth. So for a non-diabetic person, breaking it with a small bowl of fruits, then immediately don't eat. Give some time. Give an hour's break, because that's going to be enough to keep your metabolism running.
Right.
Maybe an hour later, you start up with a major meal, and then again, when you have the morning, when you're going to begin the fast, the early morning
Hmm.
prayers. Before that, you have a heavy meal.
Right.
So this is
That it
how.
sustains you for
Yeah,
a
so
period
so
of
that
time.
it sustains you. Yes,
Right.
yes.
And
So,
in terms of fats, is fat something that you can break a fast with? Is that recommended?
well, there are
Like
two sides to it.
nuts or coconut oil or,
You can, but typically what happens is, because see, again, we need carbs for our
right.
functioning, right? So there is a carb deficit for almost, say, 10 to 15 hours what
Hmm.
body has been in when you're fasting. So generally we don't recommend just the nuts. The reason is, carbs, if you fuel it, the complex carbs, if you fuel it at the time of breakage of fast, it basically reactivates your metabolism
Right.
energetically, as well as it covers up the deficit, if at all there is,
Hmm.
during the duration of fast. And then the hour later portion what we discussed, that could
Right.
go well with nuts.
Okay.
Maybe a fruit bowl, then say an hour of break, then nuts, and then you actually go to the main course. So that
Okay.
what happens is, you don't end up too
Loading
much
your body.
consumption. Yes, yes. So it's in simplified ways, if I say, when you break a fast, rather than having a heavy, wholesome full Maharaja meal. It's better to split it in,
Break it
like, say,
down.
maybe a bowl of fruits. An hour later you have a bowl of nuts and a few, complex fats, and then maybe another hour later you have your main meal, so that there's a
Yeah.
fragmented inflow of food. Yes.
All right. Thank you. That is all the time that we have for today. So thank you
Yes.
very much, Dr. Harsh. Um, if anyone has any other questions with regards to diabetes and would like to reach out to him, you can follow him. You can reach out to him at his clinic, which is drharshdiabetes.com. He has online consultation. You can physically go and see him. We have a lot more talks coming up with esteemed gastroenterologists, fertility experts, nutritionists to help us understand what clean food is. I'm Prerna Mokha. This is White Dot in Conversation with Dr. Harsh, the easy way to choose clean food. Thank you, Doctor.